Heyo, and what is up, gang? Thank you for checking out Sledgehammer TV tonight. AEW Dynamite kicks off week number 3 of the Wednesday Night War with an episode worthy of its name. This was a really fun show with a lot of really great action and some really cool things that made a lot of sense. However, even the best wrestling show makes a few mistakes, and we are here to point those things out to you as we go over everything wrong with AEW Dynamite right here and right now. My name is Nick Nightmare, and you are watching the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show AEW Dynamite Review. Let's do it! After the disastrous WWE draft and the shows that we had to tolerate on Friday and Monday, it was so good to sit down here on a Wednesday night and watch a wrestling show that gives a shit about its wrestling. We had so much great action on this night. We had 2 AEW Tag Team Championship Tournament matchups. We had 2 championship matchups. And we had some really, really interesting things happening on AEW Dynamite tonight. That being said, there were way too many tag team matches for one 2-hour program to have. To have 6 matches slated for your card and have 4 of those matches be tag team matches seems a little bit excessive. It made the show kind of feel like the same thing was happening with each passing segment. I don't know how better to explain that. It just kind of gave the show like a draggy kind of feel because we were just watching tag match after tag match after tag match. It was almost as if Teddy Long had the book tonight. It was Teddy Long Appreciation Night on AEW Dynamite. And the problem really with that is the fact that 2 of those tag team matchups were tag team championship tournament matchups, and the match that pretty much stole the night, hands down, was the tag team matchup that featured 4 single superstars. It was a randomly put together matchup to further along 2 single storylines, and it overshadowed the Tag Team Championship Tournament. It overshadowed the debut of Santana and Ortiz in their tag team match earlier in the evening, and it just seemed like a bit overkill. Too many tag team matchups in one night. That was probably my biggest criticism on the night. My second biggest thing is you'd have to be blind and you would be lying to yourself if you watched this episode of AEW and you watched that main event championship matchup with Chris Jericho, and you'd be lying if you said that Chris Jericho is in the best shape of his life. You'd be lying if you think for 1 minute that Jericho is even a shadow of himself, of what you think. When you think the name Chris Jericho, what you've seen tonight in that AEW main event is not what you had in mind. I don't know what the hell happened to Chris Jericho from the time he left his last stint in the WWE to now. But when I watched this matchup, I was reminded of like an old school bar fight between that old man who's the regular at the bar. He's there every week. He gets the same drink. The bartender knows his name. This is his bar. These are his grounds, right? He's that grumpy old guy. He's got the beer gut. He's got the long hair, the motorcycle jacket, the gruffy beard, the big beer stein in his hand. Then you got this young punk with a bunch of his friends coming in, right? And then the old man and the young punk end up having a fight outside in the parking lot. That's what it was like watching Chris Jericho versus Darby Allin. Very, very weird dynamic. The difference in age is something you can get over, but it was just off-putting. And I felt like I was watching my buddy's best friend beat down one of his little kid's friends. It was just weird, man. And Darby Allin is the type of talent that shines with somebody that can go on his level. Chris Jericho definitely could not go on the same level as the younger, more intense, more psychologically damaged Darby Allin. And then you had the whole Chris Jericho tapes his hands together thing. And I would be remiss to not tell you guys that as cool as some of that stuff was, I'm sure a lot of you guys were going off the edge of your seats and flipping out that this guy was doing all kinds of very, very impressive, athletic, high-flying maneuvers with both hands tied behind his back. Essentially, that is fantastic, and it was breathtaking to see some of this stuff. But on the other side of the equation, you got a guy like me sitting there just waiting for something bad to happen because that is tremendously unsafe. I don't care how good you are at what you do, if you do not have the use of your hands when you're doing something like professional wrestling, you are putting yourself at a much higher risk unnecessarily. You are putting your opponent at a higher risk unnecessarily, and it overall doesn't really do much for the match but give you a little bit more shock factor that a match like that didn't really need. You got Darby Allin flying all over the place without the ability to protect his head, to protect his neck, to protect his face, and I don't like things like that. It was one of my heavy criticisms of watching Orange Cassidy do a tope suicida through the ropes with his hands in his pockets. It's very dangerous. You need your hands. You need balance. You need to be able to brace yourself. That is how wild and crazy injuries can happen. And it's unnecessary risk-taking. You could say the very same thing about the Lucha Brothers. You know, I have shared a locker room with the Lucha Brothers when they came through House of Glory. I have a lot of respect for everything they have done in the professional wrestling industry. They're two tremendous talents. But when you watch them in a match like they had tonight in the Tag Team Championship Tournament versus the Jurassic Express, which wasn't really the Jurassic Express because the Luchasaurus is out of action. He's injured. So now you have Jungle Boy Jack Perry and Marco Stunt, who I just don't have any tolerance for Marco Stunt. I don't know why. He's impressive, he's athletic, but he just doesn't do it for me. But you have this match now with the Lucha Brothers, and it would have probably been tremendously different had the Luchasaurus been part of this matchup. But this was a showcase in just kind of how reckless and unnecessary the Lucha Brothers can be. There were so many spots in this match where Rey Fenix was hopping around from one rope to the other. There was one spot in particular that sticks out. He went from the inside of the ring, holding hands with Penta. He jumped to the top rope, sprung down to the bottom rope, and then just kind of spun in the air like a tornado, and then landed on his feet next to Jungle Jack Perry, doing absolutely nothing to him, no offense at all, and Jack Perry had to act like something happened to him. Jungle Boy had to look like an ass. This guy went spinning around in the air, and he did absolutely nothing, but yet there was a collision and something happening on the... And then on the other end, you got Penta in a lot of this matchup just standing around. First of all, this was not a tornado tag. These guys are making tags standing inside the ring. It's like they're making up their own rules as they go along. They're flying around, throwing their body without caution. And it's excessive. And it's just like a high spot fest. And that's not wrestling. It was not really something that calls out to me and goes, oh, wow, you really need to see this match. There were some impressive spots, but really this was just a tag team match full of high spots. There was no real drama. There was not one part of you that thought for 1 minute that the Jurassic Express, which actually looked more like you should have called them the Stone Age School Bus tonight, were going to beat the Lucha Brothers. There's just no way. So this should have been a very clean, very easy in. Boom, 1, 2, 3, out. The Luchasaurus isn't part of it. They wouldn't have suffered any damage. They could have always used that. Well, we don't have our main guy, that's why we lost. You didn't have to go out there and have them do all this acrobatic shit. It looked to me like they were mismatched, they were out of their league, and that the Lucha Brothers were really just having their way with the Stone Age School Bus. I'm sorry. These are just my criticisms. And all in all, like I said, a great show up and down. But when you look at some of these things, I have to be fair. I am a fair reviewer. I'm not just sitting here all happy that AEW exists. I'm not a former Bullet Club for lifer and all this shit. I look at wrestling as a wrestling show, and these are the things, to me, as a fan, and my personal tastes and opinions, don't really go too well with the look you're trying to put together. But now that all the hammering has commenced, let's just go up and down this card, because for the most part, there was a lot of good that we should be talking about on tonight's AEW Dynamite. It kicked off with the first tag team matchup in the AEW Tag Team Title Tournament, SCU versus the Best Friends. This, I thought, was going to be a very interesting matchup, and it did end up turning into an interesting matchup, but what happened before this matchup would also lend to my earlier point, which we were just talking about, being that the Lucha Brothers were very reckless in their performance, and it looks like they don't use any caution when they execute moves, because before the matchup, there's a pre-match attack on SCU by the Lucha Brothers. They focus in their attack on Christopher Daniels. Christopher Daniels receives a package pile driver on the ramp, on the steel ramp, that when they showed it in slow motion, you could clearly see his head was compacted on the steel. That shit had to hurt like a bitch, and Christopher Daniels was now out of action. So, Scorpio Sky came out to make the save. He would then take Christopher Daniels' spot in the matchup, and we have Scorpio Sky and Kazarian versus Trent Beretta and Chucky T. Chuck Taylor, the Best Friends, instead of Christopher Daniels as previously planned. This was a really fun match as well. This was really, really good. Scorpio Sky wrestled his shoes right off of his feet, man. That's how good this guy was. It was a great, great tag team matchup, a fun and good way to open up the show tonight, and it really got things kicked off in a good way. SCU, even with their impromptu change, finds themselves in the win column as they get the win versus Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor on this night, advancing to the semifinal rounds of the AEW title tournament. After this, we had the second tag team matchup of 4 on this evening. We had the in-ring debut of Santana and Ortiz, a very quick, impressive win over a couple of pretty much unknown guys. Normally, I would shit all over this, especially when the WWE does it and we see teams like the War Raiders, get fed enhancement talents and local talents and no-name jobbers week in and week out. But this is only week 1. This was your first taste of what Santana and Ortiz can bring to the ring. We don't know that much about AEW to know whether or not these two guys, I forget their names and I forgot to write them down. I don't know if they're pretty much mid-carders, if they're low-level jobbers, if they're just people they picked up that wrestle somewhere in the Philadelphia area. I don't need to know any of that. All you need to know is that as long as this doesn't continue, it's not a bad thing to do a squash match once in a while, especially when introducing your audience to a brand new team. And Santana and Ortiz do not have worldwide exposure as much as they would like. This was a great way to feature them. You got to see their finishing move, the Street Sweeper. You got Chris Jericho coming out and telling everybody, well, he didn't come out, he hit the Titantron. It was a video package from Chris Jericho after the fact as Santana and Ortiz were celebrating their victory, telling us immediately that this is not going to just be a continued direction of Santana and Ortiz beating a bunch of nobodies. They immediately want to go right to the top of the ladder. They threw the gauntlet down and challenged the Young Bucks to a matchup at Full Gear. One thing I didn't like about this is I don't really think it was necessary to have Chris Jericho be the man to issue the challenge. I know enough about Santana and Ortiz in my experience with them here in New York that they can talk. They can talk like nobody's business. They are masters on the mic, and they can get people's butts in seats. And there's no reason why they couldn't have took the mic, laid down the challenge, and then been supplemented by a video of Chris Jericho after Santana and Ortiz laid it down. Said, "We want the Young Bucks at Full Gear." Then you have Chris Jericho pop up, "Ha, you hear that, Bucks? The Inner Circle's coming, and we're coming right for you. What do you say, boys? You're going to come for my guys? They're street thugs. They're going to kick your ass. They're going to this and that." And just like put a little exclamation point on their challenge. But Chris Jericho making the challenge for them, to me, just was a little bit unnecessary, especially since I know that these guys are good enough on the mic that they don't need somebody like Jericho to do their dirty work for them. That being said, this is going to be one of the best matchups on Full Gear of the night. The Young Bucks versus Santana and Ortiz. it's going to knock your socks off, man. Even harder than Scorpio Sky's shoes came right off his feet. Your socks will be in the next stratosphere, man. They'll end up in a multiverse somewhere. This match, I guarantee you, is going to burn it down. Way better than Seth Rollins could ever imagine. We had a fantastic promotional package for Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is en route to his championship matchup with Chris Jericho. One of the reasons why this match with Darby Allin on this night shouldn't be happening is because Jericho's focus should be only on that. They shouldn't be overexposing the champion, especially since he's in such bad shape and didn't look good in tonight's main event, but we'll get back to that. This promotional package, however, looked fantastic. We had legends, the likes of Diamond Dallas Page. We had Jim Ross. We had Tony Schiavone. We had Cody Rhodes' mom on this show. We had MJF, his best friend, and his wife, Brandy, all outlining and telling us in a very dramatic, very emotional, impactful package about just how important this match is to Cody Rhodes. Saying how he feels like he has to beat Chris Jericho. Showing him working out. Showing him getting ready. All of his friends and family and his support behind him. It's going to be great. This was intense. This was powerful. This was great stuff. And this is the type of thing that is missing from modern day wrestling. Because this feud between Rhodes and Jericho just pretty much started. Right? We don't have any reason to fully invest in it. But then you get packages like this, you see how deep and meaningful this match and getting that championship is to Cody Rhodes. It makes the championship itself mean more because somebody wants it that bad. They're burning themselves out day and night, getting ready so that they can have the biggest match of their lives against Chris Jericho for the AEW title. I loved it. I loved every minute of that promotional package. Fantastic. You need to do more stuff like that, and everybody else needs to follow suit. Because when I was growing up, that's how you told the story outside the ring. And it was great. Just as good as tonight's women's matchup on AEW, we had an AEW Women's Championship matchup. The champion, Riho, versus Britt Baker, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. Back and forth match full of action. This would make the girls in the WWE's women's division just cream in their pants, dreaming that they could actually do and perform matches that could come out like this one. Absolutely fantastic. Britt Baker came very close on many occasions to winning the All Elite Wrestling Championship and wrestling it away from Riho, but the more experienced warrior Riho uses Britt Baker's own momentum against her in the final seconds of this matchup, showing her veteran status. Britt Baker was trying to lock in that lockjaw submission, which is kind of like a Rings of Saturn meets the Mandible Claw. And Riho was smart enough, she had her jaw locked, no pun intended, but she was clenching her jaw, keeping her mouth so tightly closed so that Britt Baker could not initiate the Mandible Claw. And in Britt Baker's one moment of weakness, she tried so hard to get and execute that maneuver that Riho used her momentum, got the advantage, had just enough leverage to scoop up a flash pinfall victory, surprising Britt Baker and everybody in the arena in Philadelphia. Riho retains the title in surprising and epic fashion, really, because this was a great women's matchup. These two girls were going at it so well done. So well done. And I was almost afraid that they were just going to give the title to Britt Baker. As much as I've been calling for that, I thought, you did this thing, you put the belt on Riho, you should stick to your guns, and I hope that they're not, going to be flip-flopping it WWE style, and that certainly was not the case. But Britt Baker, in defeat, still comes out shining like a bright star. She can get a rematch here. She definitely deserves it. I would love to see them go at it once again. This was an excellent showing for the women, And I look forward to more from Rio. This was the first time I've really gotten to see her outside of, what the AEW has shown us. And this, I think, was the first time she's truly impressed me. I thought this was a very, very good match for these girls. It started out a little slow, but once the action started going, they picked it up to another gear, and they kept it there. And applause to those girls. After this women's match, we had an update on Christopher Daniels, who suffered a stinger following that brutal package pile driver on the steel rampway, but he is okay, which is always the best news. The Jurassic Express versus the Lucha Brothers, tag title tournament match number 2 on the night. Without the Luchasaurus, like I said, this should have been called the Stone Age School Bus, and this was a bus that was on a one-way trip to Losertown, man. Like I said, there was no way these guys were going to put up a fight against the bigger, stronger, more crazy, more high-flying, more risk-taking type of team that is the Lucha Brothers. But I'm sorry, man, they are reckless. They are sloppy. Too much acrobatics, not enough solid fundamentals in their style. Penta's just standing around at some point, doing absolutely nothing. Making tags where tags aren't supposed to be made. Doing all these crazy things out of context. Wrestling without context is just gymnastics. I'm not tuning into gymnastics. However, this match at points did have some pretty good and interesting spots. The Jurassic Express, outside Private Party, were my second favorites in this tournament to win the whole thing. That obviously is not going to be the case as the Lucha Brothers advance to the semifinal round. The tag team marathon of matches continue with Pac and Moxley versus Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. This was also preceded by an awful promo by the Mox. I don't know what the hell the guy was saying. I don't know what he was trying to say. And this was a case of where the WWE maybe is not so bad. Maybe they know that certain people unscripted don't work. I don't know. I thought Moxley had a little bit something better than that. That was a terrible promo. And if that was not done live and that was a pre-taped segment, they definitely should have done a second take. Because that was awful. It was jumbled. He was all over the place. And in trying to think about it now, I can't even remember what he was trying to say. His message was so unclear. And apparently he's just mad at Kenny Omega. He's mad at Pac. He doesn't need Pac's help, but he didn't really get all that out there very clearly. This led us to the match, and you know what? I kind of like Kenny Omega and Hangman Page as a tag team. I don't know what their history is all about. Like I said, I'm not a big mark for New Japan and the Bullet Club. I didn't follow their careers. I don't know everything about them. I've seen some of their more important matchups, like Okada, Omega. I've witnessed some of that stuff, but I'm not really that much into the history of these guys. I haven't been following them forever like some of you guys maybe have. So if they were a team before, I think they should do that again. If they've never been a team, and I know they're kind of like not really getting along at this point, but the lines between who's babyface and who's heel in AEW are kind of blurred right now, and I'm not sure really what's what as far as that's concerned. But Page and Omega as a team would be a great way to familiarize both of them with the newer viewers that have, like me, don't have much experience watching their catalog of work. Show them how good these guys are in the ring. They kind of complement each other with their look. You got Hangman Page, who's got that Barry Windham vibe to him. Then you got Kenny Omega, who to me looks like a young Diamond Dallas Page, minus the charisma. Although Diamond Dallas Page couldn't wrestle even half as well as a Kenny Omega, but Kenny Omega reminds me of this generation's Diamond Dallas Page. Just in physical features and statures. He's got the hair, the same kind of hair, the scruff. I could see them being a good team. And they would be a great team for the tag team division to have. And imagine how it would go down when they finally dissolve. And you have the breakup. And maybe Hangman Page goes over as the villain and Kenny Omega stays as the babyface so you can all jerk off all over him and still love him to the moon and back the way you all do. That would be a great way to put Hangman Page on the map. That's how you make superstars out of guys that are just stars. Interesting story to be told there. If they will that way, but they won't go that way. You know that. Absolutely. Page needs to break out. Page needs a breakout performance. He needs to break out of this cowboy thing and make it a little bit more personal, do something a little different, make himself stand out a little more, because he just looks like everybody else to me still once he gets in the ring. He's doing all these matchups, all these tag matches. We're seeing all the same things, all the high-flying topes, all the suicidas, all of the hurricane ranas, all of the same things over and over again. This match got a little crazy when it came down to the Mox and Kenny Omega. All of a sudden, there was barbed wire weapons around, right? And these guys were going to go and attack each other once again. One guy with the bat barbed wire, the other guy with the broom barbed wire. And then Pac came out of nowhere. He went right up to Moxley and started grabbing at the barbed wire weapons in his hand and lacerated his fingers. I don't know if it was one finger. I don't know if it was two fingers. I don't know if it was all his fingers or his palm, but the guy was bleeding profusely. There was a lot of blood on tonight's episode of AEW as well. He ripped his finger grabbing that barbed wire. Moxley gets pissed off about this after Pac spoils all his fun. He flips him off with the double bird and then gives him a Stone Cold Steve Austin style kick, but instead of ending it off with a stunner, he gives him a double arm DDT and then leaves the match, leaving Pac high and dry, all on his own to fend himself against Page and Omega, which was not going to happen. The rest of this was academic as Kenny Omega and Hangman Page win this very impressive, very wild, very, very fun tag team matchup that stole the entire show. This was the best match of the night as far as I'm concerned. We had Jim Ross announce next week the tag team tournament semi-final matchups will both take place on next week's episode as we get closer to Full Gear and probably the coronation of the first ever AEW tag team champions. We also had the announcement of Pac versus Moxley, which just happened. They had the graphic ready and made for it and everything. And here we go. WWE style, right? Don't you think maybe Pac versus Moxley in a one-on-one environment, coming off of this situation, is maybe a little bit too big for a Dynamite? Maybe you can actually get people to buy your pay-per-view off of the power of these two former WWE guys going at it? Especially since they're both beloved, they both have their own rabid fan bases. I think it would be very special to see down the line. And I know they already have plans for Kenny Omega at Full Gear, so you don't have to blow this off there. This should actually truly begin there, based off of what happened tonight. You had the interaction between Pac and Moxley. If I was writing this thing, nothing would be happening next week between these two. Nothing would be happening the following week between these two. But during the Omega versus Moxley match at Full Gear, Pac would interfere, make that match end with no conclusion. You have a no contest or even a double disqualification or whatever the case may be. And then from there, you insert him into this and you have the triple threat at some point down the line. Omega, Pac versus Moxley. That's how you could have done this and not seem to make it so rush. This is something that you're burning through already that has the potential to be something to sell an entire pay-per-view. So I'm not really on board with this match happening so quickly. Sure, it's going to get people to tune in. You know, you want to make the bump. You want to have everybody, showing up for AEW Dynamite. I get it. You want to book your biggest matches, I guess. But some matches like this one maybe are a little bit too big for your weekly televised television show. Then we have the AEW Championship matchup, the main event of the evening that never should have been. The Philadelphia Street Fight, Darby Allin versus Chris Jericho. like I said, this reminded me of an old man versus a young kid in a bar fight, fighting over whose bar stool it actually is. Chris Jericho looks like crap, definitely losing a step or two. It was very visible that he couldn't keep up with Darby Allin on multiple occasions, struggling with the simplest of takedowns, even just crucifix roll-ups and very simple, basic wrestling maneuvers. You could see the grimacing on Chris Jericho's face as he was struggling to do these very easy things. It's very... Let's just say that 50-year-old Chris Jericho in the ring could not hold a candle to 50-year-old Ric Flair or a 40-year-old Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25, or even Shawn Michaels right now. I bet you could wrestle circles around a Y2J Chris Jericho. Not the best look for your first ever champion. I understand the name value, but when the guy can't go in the ring, and you're looking at a man who, just like a Rey Mysterio or any of the other veterans, the Goldbergs of the world, when they come back, they just don't perform at the level your brain is used to seeing them perform on. So is this Chris Jericho? To me, in name only. He can come out in his little Clockwork Orange makeup and his crazy spiky leather jacket. He can come out to his own theme song with his Judas in My Mind. He could drink all the fucking bubbly he wants. But he is not Chris Jericho. He's not. And in this guy's opinion, the sooner they get that belt off of Chris Jericho and onto literally anybody else. Do you think at this point now they really need Chris Jericho to be the champion? The show has been launched. They're going to have a steady 1 million viewership, 1.2, 1.4, whatever it is. They have their fan base. They don't need it to be all about Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho defeats Darby Allin. Told you guys Darby Allin was going to end up getting the loss. I got people telling me, oh, they might go the time limit, make Darby Allin look formidable. Nope. Darby Allin did look formidable. He also looked like a jackass because all of the stuff he was doing with his hands tied together, which I already earlier told you guys my criticisms against. All for this to just be for nothing anyway, because Jake Hager, Hagar the Horrible, whatever you want to call him, comes out, gets involved, gives Jericho the advantage. Next thing you know, Jericho's winning the matchup. Darby Allin loses. And that's it. And that was your episode of AEW Dynamite on TNT for week number 3, kicking off the Wednesday Night War for this week. And it was a good show. Don't let my criticisms fool you. I enjoyed the majority of this show. A lot of the action was very good. It was just the repetitiveness of the tag team matchups and the Jericho Allin match, which I already criticized last week on this show. Told you guys why it shouldn't have been happening, and they didn't do anything really all that bad. Really, I just don't see the point. I didn't see the point of this matchup happening. It doesn't do anything to make Jericho look good. Didn't do anything to make Darby Allin look that great. How many times is he going to have his hands tied up like that? So, people shouldn't be expecting to see that all the time. And if they are, then shame on you, man, because this kid's going to kill himself. Oh, my God. That's it for AEW Dynamite tonight, you guys. Thank you guys for being with me once again on the channel. Thank you for being with me all week long as we continue the pro wrestling review train, which is apparently just never, ever going to end. If you guys missed anything else on this channel, make sure you check it out right now. Today, earlier this afternoon, I didn't throw up. I posted another Sledgehammer short, which we decided to draw the legit boss, Sasha Banks. So, if you're into art and you like watching people draw stuff, and it's time-lapse, so it's only like 2 or 3 minutes. It's done really, really fast. It's an hour and a half's worth of work, crunched down into 3 minutes for your viewing pleasure, and you could check out me drawing Sasha Banks on the latest episode of the Sledgehammer Shorts, which will be in the annotations up above. If you missed anything we reviewed throughout the week, our review of the WWE Draft, where we brought the hammer down on the worst draft of all time, parts 1 and 2, Friday Night SmackDown and Monday Night Raw. Those reviews are live on the channel right now. If you missed last week's review of Hell in a Cell, that is live and on the channel right now as well. And also, many of you guys might not have realized, but every Saturday we are putting up the head-to-head breakdown. And if you missed that, you need to go check that out, because that episode contains the first ever presentation of the Poop Hammer Award. And if you want to know who was the first ever recipient of the Poop Hammer for the Monday Night Wars, the Wednesday Night Wars, whoa, brain lapse, you're going to have to check that one out. Everything Wrong with the Wednesday Night War Week 2, live on the channel right now. Everything Wrong with the Wednesday Night War Week 3 will be live on this channel Saturday night. Just like we did last week, tomorrow night we will give you guys our NXT review and reaction, which we haven't gotten a chance to watch yet, and we are going to do that right now as we end this video, and we will give you guys our review on that as well. Also, the first post-draft episode of SmackDown Live, as they're trying to lead us into Crown Jewel. The most unnecessary, unimportant, and unneeded pay-per-view of the year. My name is Nick Nightmare. This is the team, Thor the Sledgehammer, the official Sledgehammer of the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show. His tag team partner, the World Heavyweight Champion of all the microphones in all the world, Mr. Blue the Snowball. The most important member of the team, as always, is each and every one of you. Do not forget, if you are not already a member of this family, to hit that subscribe button right now and become one of the over 2,000 strong that know when you want your wrestling news full of fun and entertainment, and not just bullshitting and bitching and screaming, that this is the place to be, and that is Sledgehammer TV. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing as we keep this wrestling train a-rolling, and then share this video with each and every one of your wrestling buddies all over the wrestling world, especially if they actually had a good time watching AEW Dynamite tonight, but need to be educated on what still was wrong with what was even a very good show. That, my friends, is going to do it, and we are out of here, and we will see you next time right here on your new favorite wrestling show, the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show, only on Sledgehammer TV, right here on YouTube.com. Boom.